It was New York City in the 1960s, and the city was lit up with color and life 24 hours a day. From the madmen of the Madison Avenue advertising companies with their crisp, pressed suits, slick haircuts, and even slicker salesmanship to the revolutionary art and culture of Greenwich Village, it was the place to be. From dusk until dawn, then all throughout the day, the streets were positively flooded with people on their way to work, headed out for a night on the town, or looking to get into some trouble. It wasn't likely that you would notice one man keeping to himself, his hands in his pockets, the brim of his hat pulled low over his forehead and casting a shadow over his eyes, unless, of course, you were looking for him. You see, this particular man had caught the attention of a particularly unsavory group of fellows. The DiMauro crime family was not the sort of group you wanted to get on the bad side of, especially the family's eldest son, Mario DiMauro. And unfortunately for this quiet man in the slate gray suit, keeping his head down, he had found himself smack dab in the middle of Mario's bad side. He hadn't done anything wrong, really. He'd been walking by a bakery a few days prior when he bumped into a little old lady by mistake. He didn't mean to bump her, he didn't mean to make her stumble, and he certainly didn't intend to make her drop the birthday cake she was holding. But it all happened just the same. The cake box fell to the ground, the cardboard crumpled, and suddenly there was vanilla sponge and buttercream frosting splattered all over the filthy city sidewalk. The strange man helped the little old lady back up to her feet and apologized for the trouble as she cried that her son's 30th birthday was ruined. He watched her adjust her hat and run away, and felt a pang of regret, but soon forgot all about the cake, the lady, the birthday. Mario didn't. His friends called him Mario Birthday Boy DiMauro for a reason. All year he looked forward to one thing, his favorite cake from his favorite bakery, delivered to him by his favorite person, his mother. When Mrs. DiMauro described the stranger who had caused her to drop the cake, Mario decided that this disrespect to him, to his mother, to his entire family would not go unpunished. He sent out a group of his favorite lackeys, Bobby the Weasel Passarella, Vernon Two-Knife Galletti, and Ben the Mammoth Santoni. They tracked the man down, figured out his usual haunts, his schedule, the streets he walked down every day, and reported back. Mario gave the order. It was time to make their move. And so, on that ordinary day, as that nice, neat, polite man walked down the street, his cake mistake far from his mind, Mario and the boys watched from the shadows. Ordinarily, Mario wouldn't involve himself directly in this kind of nasty business. He would send others to do his dirty work. But this was personal, and he wanted to be there to see the look on this disrespectful stranger's face as he learned his lesson. The men trailed him all day, waiting until it was dark, until the man was alone. Then, and only then, they would strike. Curiously, the man never did much of anything other than walk around the city avoiding others. If someone spoke to him, asked him for directions, he would answer them courteously, but then he would continue on his way. Once he stopped at a restaurant for a steak and a glass of water, but he seemed to have no job, no family, no friends, or really much of a life at all. Though the others were perplexed, Mario was delighted. There was no one to miss this man once he was gone. This would be even easier than he had expected. As the streets grew darker and the night deepened, the mobsters prepared to execute their attack. Armed with knives, guns, piano wire, and all their trusty usual suspects, they were poised for the perfect moment. And that perfect moment had arrived. The strange man turned down an alley and the group followed him into the shadows. They were just about to corner him when the man turned around and faced them. "Excuse me, gentlemen." The man spoke in a clipped voice, refined but cold, with an accent none of them could quite place. "Would you care to explain why you've been following me all day? It's becoming a bit unsettling." The group froze, shocked. What kind of game was this guy playing?
"Listen here, wise guy,"
Vernon said, holding one of his signature 2 knives in each hand.
"We don't take kindly to folks with bad manners. We thought we'd give you a good old-fashioned etiquette lesson."
"Have we met?" the strange man asked, perplexed.
"No, but we're about to become well acquainted."
Vernon took a step forward, the blades glinting menacingly in the limited light. There was nothing behind his target but a closed-off alleyway, nowhere to run. "I don't think you want to do that." The man held his hands up in a gesture of peace. "Please, It would be a terrible idea. Vernon laughed.
Would you get a load of this clown?
Ben shrugged his massive shoulders and cracked his knuckles. Bobby wound the sharp piano wire around his fists, ready to wrap it around the stranger's neck. Enough small talk! Got him, Vernon! Mario called out, stepping forward to get a better look at his intended victim. I've had just about enough of this. At his boss's word, Vernon rushed at the stranger, stabbing him in the stomach. Suddenly, he cried out, one of his knives falling to the ground with a clatter. He grabbed at his own abdomen, stumbling back as blood poured between his fingers.
He got me!
With what? Called Ben. I tried to warn you. The stranger sighed, almost sounding disappointed that no one had listened to him.
Forget it, I'll handle this!
Bobby grabbed a hold of the stranger, pulling the piano wire tight across his throat. No sooner had the wire tightened across the man's windpipe than Bobby was on his knees on the ground, clawing at his own throat as he gasped for air. A thin line of blood trickled down his neck. There, something invisible, small and sharp, had cut into his skin. Ben rushed to the side of his fallen brethren, picking them up in his massive arms and pulling them back out of the way.
I guess if you want something done right, you gotta do it yourself,
Mario said, pulling his favorite pistol out of his pocket and aiming it directly between the stranger's eyes. Please, you don't want to do this, the stranger begged, but Mario wouldn't yield.
Oh, I very much do. Call it a belated birthday present.
And he pulled the trigger. When the police arrived to investigate the sound of gunshots, they found a bizarre sight. 4 gangsters lying dead on the ground from a gunshot wound, choking, stabbing, and a heavy blow to the head. At the center of it all, there was one man, completely unharmed except for a hole in his shirt and some dirt on his suit. Unsure what else to do with the situation, they arrested the man and brought him in for questioning. The murder suspect had no identification on him and refused to give the officers a full name. So they threw him in a holding cell and designated him a John Doe. They questioned the man for hours, trying to get him to explain how he had taken down 4 of the city's deadliest gangsters without getting a scratch on him, or where he had managed to stash his weapons before the police got there. Every time he insisted, I never touched them. At the same time, the SCP Foundation was combing their way through arrest records, looking for any signs of the strange and unusual passing through police custody. They paid particular attention to John and Jane Does, looking for people with superhuman abilities or unexplained characteristics. The events in New York City caught their eye, and a Foundation operative was dispatched to retrieve the strange man from the NYPD. They found him sitting in his cell, reading a newspaper, refusing to answer any more questions. When the operative noticed a large bruise on the attending officer's face, he stammered,
The guy wasn't cooperating. I tried to show him I was serious, but this happened.
He hit you? The operative asked. The policeman simply shook his head.
No, I don't know how he does it. I hit him.
The man was released into the custody of the SCP Foundation and officially designated SCP-073. SCP-073 is a man of Middle Eastern descent, standing at 6 foot 1 inches tall, with black hair and blue eyes. He appears to be in his early 30s, but research indicates that he is much older than that. He looks like an average man with a few noticeable exceptions. His arms, legs, spinal cord, and shoulder blades have been replaced with metal of some kind. When asked about these metal additions, the subject seems surprised and insists that he has no memory of when or why the alterations were made. He has a symbol carved into his forehead, which has not yet been translated, though it seems to be Sumerian in origin. The subject is aware of the symbol's presence, but does not like to discuss it at all. He becomes distressed whenever it is brought up and refuses to explain. SCP-073 has the needs of an ordinary human being and requires regular consumption of meals as well as plenty of water. He subsists on a strictly animal-based diet of various meats and cheeses, which are provided for him on demand. He refers to himself as Kane, and is generally friendly and polite to everyone he interacts with, if a bit formal and stiff. He is extremely helpful and has volunteered to help out with various tasks around the Foundation's site, from cleaning and general maintenance to assisting in research. He prefers to provide assistance on the research side of things, largely due to his photographic memory, wide knowledge of world history, and fluency in most of the world's common spoken languages. When he was first brought into Foundation custody, he provided evidence of these skills via a placement test in French, German, English, Japanese, Mandarin, Italian, and a dozen other languages, a trivia contest where he bested the Foundation's top historian, and a memory exam wherein he read an entire 800-page dictionary in a minute and a half, and was able to recite every single word without help. In addition to his intelligence and some of the unusual aspects of his appearance, the subject also possesses some impressive and strange abilities. Cain's physical presence is deadly to any life grown in soil, from fruits and vegetables to trees, grass, and anaerobic bacteria. Any soil that Cain sets foot on will experience this effect, which extends to all land in a 20-meter radius. Cain also has a destructive impact on plant-based material that has undergone processing, including paper and wood, and on produce that has been grown hydroponically. It is unknown why his presence has this effect, but it influences everything from his diet to the furniture placed in his containment chamber. Cain is impervious to physical harm, which is not out of the ordinary for an anomaly in the custody of the SCP Foundation, but the way in which this invulnerability manifests is particularly notable. Any violence that is directed towards Cain bounces off of him and turns back on his attacker. Whatever is done to him will affect the person attempting to hurt him. This applies whether a person means harm or not, and whether they use a weapon or their bare hands. Though the harm done to Cain does not show up as a physical injury, he does still experience the sensation of pain, and has requested that the Foundation refrain from any especially painful tasks, especially since he has been so cooperative with their research. SCP-073's resistance to any physical damage has made it difficult for the Foundation to perform any in-depth medical tests on him. A few days after he was first brought into the research facility, a team of scientists began to take various DNA samples. At first, the process went smoothly. They cut off a small piece of Cain's hair, swabbed his mouth for a saliva sample, and scraped a few dead skin cells from the surface of his arm. Then, with the man's permission, they decided to go a bit deeper and take some blood and tissue samples. This is where the trouble began. The researcher in charge of taking the blood sample complained of a sudden sharp pain when she pricked Cain's arm with the needle, occurring in the small part of her own arm. Nevertheless, she pushed through and took a small vial of blood. However, when the blood was tested, it was found to belong to a 40-year-old woman. Somehow, instead of drawing blood from the test subject, the needle had filled the vial with the researcher's own blood. The research team tried again, with a different doctor administering the blood test, but the same thing happened again, and again, and again. Each time, the person taking the blood sample somehow extracted a small amount of their own blood. When the team attempted to take a small tissue sample from Cain, cutting off a tiny portion of skin with a scalpel, the same thing happened. Cain's skin was left completely unharmed, and the tissue sample wound up belonging to the doctor who took it in the first place. Eventually, after a lot of trial and failure, the head researcher declared that there would be no more medical tests performed on SCP-073. "If we keep going at this rate, we're going to have to organize a blood drive," he quipped when pressed on the matter by higher-ups. Why nobody asked him to take his own blood is, to this day, a mystery. Because the attempts to test Cain's blood and other organic tissue have proven fruitless, the research team turned their attention to the more inorganic parts of his body, namely the portions of unidentified metal located along his limbs, shoulder blades, and spine. After taking a closer look at the metal, one research assistant suggested that it might be beryllium bronze, a metal that has appeared under a variety of other anomalous circumstances. SCP-073 confirmed that this metal originated in the Middle East many years ago, but was unable to provide an exact date, location, or purpose of origin. Beryllium bronze has been identified as a component in several SCPs so far, including SCP-1216, SCP-1427, SCP-2481, and SCP-2711. Further research into the unusual metal and its connection to many ancient civilizations is considered a top priority. Currently, Cain is kept at SCP Foundation Site-17, where he is permitted to roam freely as long as he does not leave the facility or come into contact with any plant-based SCPs, or plants of any kind. A new researcher that encountered Cain in the site asked him for his opinion on a bouquet of flowers the researcher had purchased for his wife. Before Cain could protest, the researcher had placed the bouquet in his hands, where it immediately disintegrated, much to the distress of both men. Cain apologized profusely and told the researcher that he would offer to pay for a new bouquet, but unfortunately, he did not have any money. A memo was sent out to all site staff later that day to remind them of Cain's effect on plant-based life forms. Due to the frequent staff turnover at SCP Foundation sites, this reminder is issued on a regular basis. In addition to the reminder about plant life exposure, Foundation staff are routinely reminded that they must never use any violence against SCP-073 under any circumstances. Great emphasis is placed on the fact that this rule is for their own safety, not for the safety of SCP-073, though most of the staff know by now not to deliberately harm SCP-073 in any way. Accidents still happen, and one careless moment could result in unintentional self-injury. For example, one day Dr. Byer was having lunch in the cafeteria, walking to his seat with his favorite dish, a steaming hot bowl of tomato soup, with a grilled cheese sandwich on the side. He had specifically asked the kitchen staff to make it as hot as possible, so that it would still be warm when he had finished his sandwich and several chapters of the book he was reading on his break. As he passed SCP-073, who was enjoying a meal of his own, Dr. Byer tripped and spilled his scalding hot soup all over the man's back. Before he could react, he fell to his knees in pain as blisters and burns erupted across his own back. Kane jumped up from the table with a surprised yell, but his skin remained unblemished. Dr. Byer, on the other hand, had to spend the rest of his lunch break in the medical wing, and never got to finish that soup. Kane is permitted to interact with other SCPs as long as interaction between the two is not considered dangerous for one or more parties involved. He has not expressed much interest in other SCPs, with the exception of the few that are permitted to roam the facility as they please. For example, he has engaged in some polite small talk with SCP-507, and always gives a friendly pat on the head to SCP-999 whenever he bumps into it. There is one SCP, however, that Kane has specifically requested he never be in a room with. SCP-076, also known as Abel. Though he has kept his personal knowledge of SCP-076 to himself, Kane has admitted that he knows everything about the man. He would not elaborate further, and simply said that it would be better for everyone involved if the two never met. No one knows for certain what would happen if those two superhumans came face to face, but if someone as powerful as Kane is afraid of the consequences, it certainly cannot be good. Now go check out SCP-073 and SCP-076 Kane vs. Abel, and SCP-6008 Noah's Ark for more epic anomalies.